Welcome to the PTA Real Estate Podcast. I'm your host, John Caligiuri, accompanied by my co-host, Nick Kelly. Nick, how you doing tonight?
Howdy, I'm doing great.
I'm very excited. We have a very special guest tonight, Christopher Aumick. Chris, how you doing tonight?
Hey, great guys. Thank you very much for having me on tonight.
We're very excited to have you. You are one of our first guests with multiple real estate properties in your portfolio. So before we jump into that, Chris, where are you from? And kind of give us a little background about you. How did you get into real estate?
Sure. Yeah. So I live in New Jersey, and I do all of my real estate investing for the most part out of state. I have done a couple of flips in New Jersey, but I really got started almost accidentally when I met my wife. She had a condo in Myrtle Beach, and I had a house in Hopatcon, in Lake Hopatcon, and she was going to move to New Jersey. So we can start a life together, and what we were going to do with the condo. And I insisted on keeping it. And we rented that out for about 20 years, long distance. But that really, I learned a lot. I kind of did things backwards where I learned the ins and outs of real estate by living it. And now I'm watching the podcast and reading the books. So I've kind of done it all backwards. I've lived it, and now I'm reading it. But I get better every year.
That's awesome. That's your first deal was a out-of-state deal.
Yep. And then, so my wife is originally from Vermont. And, so one of our most recent deals is that condo that we've owned for over 20 years, and we've rented it out. It taught us so much. It really did. One of the things it taught us was, single family versus multifamily. So for example, every time that condo was empty for whatever reason, my wife and I paid the mortgage on that. Ever since doing the switch to multifamily, we've never had to come out of pocket to pay a mortgage. One of the examples I can give is so we have a triplex up in Vermont right now. And, one of the things they say is if you have, one tenant not pay rent, shame on them. If all three stop paying rent, shame on you because you didn't do your diligence and you just plugged unqualified tenants in there. So there's really a safety factor with that. Most people think, one family, and then it's more of a safe zone type of thing where you have better insurance with the more units, the more protected you are.
So when vetting for a tenant, what do you look for with the income and credit, or is there more that go into it, or?
So yeah, I mean, and that's the biggest thing. Like with these rental properties, the fastest way to get out of it is with bad tenants. So you really have to have your criteria and stick to it. No stories, this, that. You really have to have your criteria for that area and stick with it. So for example, where I am in Vermont, the credit score is a little low, but it's more of a C-class neighborhood. Right. So you have to take that into consideration. But basically, you have to make 2.5 times your income every month has to be 2.5 times of what the rent is. A lot of people want 3 times. We do 2.5. And then we won't rent to anybody with less than a 600 credit score.
Okay.
No,
that's
Chris,
what I'm kind of seeing too in C-class areas around Houston as well. In Houston, actually, I've been denied quite a few people that wanted to rent a house because they had lower than a 620 and didn't make that 3 times income in C-class neighborhoods.
Yeah,
it's pretty competitive. It's like you're almost better off buying, but some people are just so focused on renting. It's kind of ridiculous.
Yeah, you are, and I have I'm in an interesting neighborhood up in Vermont. So I have a duplex up there as well. The duplex, I have a doctor in one of the units. She's a veterinarian. The other unit is a nurse, long-term residents, professionals, and then I also have a triplex within walking distance where I have Section 8 tenants, where you get the government assistance, which is nice too because it's a guaranteed check every month right in your direct deposit. So there's advantages to that too.
So, Chris, you said you started out with the condo in Myrtle Beach. what were some of the reasons that kind of led you from shifting from the single family condo unit to the multifamily? Can you walk us through that?
Yeah, so yeah, great question. So basically, we had this condo in Myrtle Beach for over 2 decades, just about paid off, and even with that, we probably had somewhere close to $170,000 in equity. Um, we were making maybe $600-700 a month off of it. So for that much equity, the ratio of the cash on cash is terrible. So what we did with that, John, is once I realized that property was no longer serving us, that equity, even that property paid off, is doing us a disservice. It's making us less than 10% a year. You're really better off just parking that money someplace else. So what we did is we ended up selling that property. We didn't do a 1031 exchange for a number of reasons. One is, the taxes that we were going to pay on it were kind of equivalent to the inflation in the market of where we're going to buy at, and we had some other intentions for the money as well. But we ended up selling that property, and I took that property where we were making maybe $600-700 a month off of it, and I took $70,000 of that, and I parked it into a 4-family. 3-car garage that when I'm done with it, this property will make us over $4,000 a month. Now I'm bringing debt on with it. So I'm carrying about $200,000 in debt on this property, but this is what we call good debt, right? So if I can make $4,000 a month on 200 grand, I'll do that all day, every day, right? So if I can go and I can make 8 grand on double that, you know what I'm saying? Like
No,
I'll just
I can completely
can't
agree.
have enough debt.
Nick Kelling, can you explain the difference between good debt and bad debt, just for the listeners out there who are the laymen out there?
Yeah, so bad debt is a lot of things that I run into with my clients. They're in credit card debt. That's bad debt. Good debt is debt that you have within your house that a lot of times your tenant is paying for. So if you have an investment property, yeah, it might be $300,000 in debt, but my rental property is cash flowing and they're paying my rent. That's when people are saying that's good debt. And you build an equity. It's not just like a credit card debt.
And so, Chris, you mentioned you didn't do the 1039 exchange, and you thought that you weren't making good cash flow on that, and you were making under 10%. What is your opinion on holding cash or invest in the market? Like, what is your kind of investment strategy on that?
So, I come to school of Robert Kiyosaki's Rich Dad, Poor Dad and Grant Cardone. Cash is trash. With inflation, saving is for losers. If you got your money sitting in a savings account, enjoy the middle class, because that's where you're going to stay. You got to put that money to work. You can't outwork your money. Warren Buffett says if you don't find a way to make money while you sleep, you're going to work till you're dead, right? So, one of the things I'm excited about this recent deal I did, the 4-family house, is this 4-family house alone, and I'm in the process of doing the rehabs. But once it's complete and it's performing like it should, this one deal is going to make me more money than Social Security is going to pay me after working 25, 30 years in corporate America.
Wow. See, and I think that just goes to show the power of real estate, the power of investing, and how all those social programs are really, in my opinion, meant to hold people down, not lift people up. Or
meant
they might have
losers who save.
Yes.
Yeah, no, I agree. You can't. You have to take care of yourself. I wouldn't count on that pension or that 401k or that Social Security check. You really have to have another leg in that stool. Otherwise, you're going to have to downsize in your retirement and that kind of thing. I want to enjoy my retirement. I don't want to get by.
So we talked about cash flow, and you were making like $500 on one property and a couple thousand on another. What are some other ways a rental property can make money for the people that don't know?
So I've got an interesting property now. The four family that I just purchased. So there's forced appreciation, of course, right? Where sometimes you have to cycle some of the tenants out of there. You have to rehab the units, which I'm in the process of doing. But I'll literally double the rents. The other interesting piece is this property came with three huge storage units on it. They're like 12 by 48. Um, the rents haven't been raised in years. Um, so I'm really looking forward to optimizing the rents with the storage units. I have a property manager lined up who's actually talking about bartering. He's got a few classic cars he wants to keep in one of these units in exchange to be my property manager. So we'll see how that works out.
It's a good trade.
So, Chris, when you do acquire a new apartment building or multifamily home, can you walk us through what you like your process or your checklist is of XYZ of the rents haven't been raised, this needs a new coat of paint? What is kind of your checklist for the force appreciation?
Yeah, so for the most part, when I'm looking at properties, I like three families and above. I haven't gone to a 5 unit yet. Things get, because at that point it's commercial insurance. It's a little bit of a different ball game. So I love small balling with the three families, four families, and duplexes. But one of the first rules of thumb that I look at that I love is the 1% rule. That's a quick, easy, dirty rule. And basically what that is, if a property is listed for $500,000, it should be making close to 1%, or at least have the potential with the forced appreciation to make 1%, which would be $5,000 a month. If not, you're going to come out of pocket to pay for that property. So if those numbers, aren't pretty close, I just keep thumbing through and keep looking for different deals. Some of the other things that I prefer with the multifamily is if you could I like to have at least one unit open if you can, because you can rehab that unit and start the forced appreciation right away. That way, I don't like to get into the business of forcing tenants out and that kind of thing. So if you can get into the rehab quicker with one unit open, maybe 2 units occupied, so it's paying for itself, you're not coming out of pocket, and you can just focus on that unit. That's kind of ideal.
And Chris, what is kind of your deal flow? How many units are you purchasing, or how many properties are you purchasing a year? Do you have kind of walk me through your process of what do you set like goals of being in a year? Like, hey, I want to go from one property to three properties. Kind of like explain how you went from one, because I think you said before you had 7 properties. Kind of explain how you went from 1 to 7 and what your thought process is now.
Yeah, so I mean, I'm definitely, not scaling as fast as I could be, or probably as aggressive as I should be. It's definitely a slow roll. But what I like to do is when I get these properties, they may not be a home run year one, but within 2-3 years, that property is a home run. It's cash flowing. I don't have to worry about it. One unit occupied, it's paying for itself. Then I go to the next property. That's kind of how I do it. If something comes up, I'm not going to say no. I'm always looking for partners. If there's something out there that makes sense, I'm always open to deals. But, the way I'm scaling, it's definitely slow, but it's my comfort zone. And it's all about your comfort zone and taking action. That's the important thing is at some point, you got to take action. I have, friends and families that have read more real estate books than I have, but they don't own their first rental property. So that's why it's so important to take action.
And on that, I know you kind of said you kind of backed into it of the condo in Myrtle Beach, but what after you kind of got that one deal under your belt, what was the motivating factor for you to take more additional action? Because I know there's a lot of people who own multiple homes, maybe they own a condo and there's renting it out, renting it out. So what was kind of like the impetus for you to take action and keep it going?
So it's networking. Networking is huge. I ride motorcycles and four-wheelers, and I was riding four-wheelers with a guy that does real estate, and he has multifamilies and he does flips. And we start talking, and we got an LLC, and we did a flip together, and that really got got me motivated to get aggressive about it. Like I said, I've been I've been a landlord for 20 plus years, but I haven't really taken action for the last 5. Now it's getting closer to retirement, and I'm looking at the numbers. You start panicking a little bit. So now I'm really, being more aggressive, than I have in the past.
So you said you've been a landlord. What was so like you said you're getting more aggressive now. Like, what steps are you taking? Are you reaching out to more realtors? Are you grinding on Zillow? How do you find your deals? At word of mouth?
Yeah, no, I've definitely networked. I've got friends that are realtors. I have a realtor in New Jersey. He just does the HUD foreclosures. So he's always sending me listings. I have a realtor in Vermont. He's always sending me stuff on the multifamilies. Things like that. So, if I do see a deal, I do approach partners. I've approached my neighbor. A lot of people that I approach in New Jersey are really hesitant. I'll show them good deals, but they're really hesitant to invest out of state. And normally it's the spouse or the significant other that kind of puts the kibosh on the deals.
And you need both of them on track. Don't just leave your wife behind. Be like, oh, I just bought a house.
Absolutely. And just, just one quick point I want to say is, with the wives and the spouses and what have you, when I did my first flip with my partner in New Jersey, I made sure the first thing I did is I bought my wife a new SUV with that money.
Nice.
Got her on board, and then I was blessed to do other deals.
The women always want to see an actual return on like an actual item, like a vehicle or jewelry or something like that.
They don't care about equity.
No, equity. I can't see that. I can't hold that. So now that you're pretty experienced in this and going from, like, I deal with a lot of young people. I know a lot of young people watch this podcast. What are some things you wish you knew before you started that you could advise them on?
So I probably have a daughter that's, like relatively close to your listener's age, 24. And what I try to stress to her is your first house, because this is the only time you're going to get this, where you'll get that first time home buyer. You're going to put 3 or 6% down, get a multifamily, 3 or 4 family, live in it, and you will thank yourself years down the road. But that's an easy, quick way to get into it. You will have your tenants paying for your rent. You will live there for free, and you will make money off the deal. When you decide to leave, you rent your unit out, you buy your primary, you can borrow equity off of that to put down on your primary. But that's one of the things I wish I did, is your first house should definitely be a multifamily. This is a tough pill to swallow, but, Grant Cardone preaches this. And look, I love my primary home in New Jersey. I'm on 5 acres in Mount Olive. Love it, right? But at the end of the day, primary homes are bad investments. Now, even though, I can tell you my primary home has doubled in value, primary homes are not good investments. There's better investments. It's not the best place to park your money. You don't want to go out and buy a bunch of primary homes, to scale. That's not the way to do it. You want to go with multifamilies.
Chris, I completely agree. I look at your primary home as not an investment, but more of an asset, if that makes sense.
Sure. And you know what? It's kind of a struggle, because, most people in this country, most of their net worth is in their primary home. And it's also, it's the quickest way for most people to build net worth as a primary home. But at the end of the day, it's not the best place to park your money. You're better off parking that money in a multifamily home to get started with. You buy your primary home once you've established yourself and you're ready to buy the nice cars and the bells and whistles and that kind of thing.
I completely agree. You said you did some house flipping as well. Kind of walk us through one of those deals. How did you go from real estate investing to house flipping?
Yeah, so I have a friend that lives in the neighborhood, and we ride four-wheelers together. And we started talking, and he was in the business. He's done a couple of flips. He owns a couple of multifamilies. So we decided to go ahead and do an LLC. And one of the deals we did was it was a condo. Um, it was a foreclosure. We bought it for $94,000 and change. Um, Beautiful unit. I wish I would have held on to it, but we turned it around. We did most of the work ourselves, right? And so it's like we have 9 to 5 jobs. So it's getting out of work, going there, and so I found out quickly that flipping is just another job, right? Flipping to me is not investing. Flipping to me is another job. And it's also the most risky because you're usually putting they're usually cash deals you're putting together. When you're on a timeline like that, you're usually not getting a mortgage. It's usually your own cash, borrowed from a 401, hard money. You're not going to a typical lender most of the time for flips. But I
That are
found out,
super high interest rate.
exactly. But it's definitely it's the riskiest, and it is another job. But even if you're just PMing it, I'm not a very handy guy. Like I sub out 80% of the work. I do some heavy lifting. That's about it. Um, but yeah, it still is. It's another. It's like having a second job when you start doing the flipping. So then I started watching Brandon Turner from Bigger Pockets. I'm a huge fan of his. You can learn so much from podcasts. I love what you guys are doing. I can honestly say, from watching podcasts like yours and Brandon Turner's, I've increased my net worth. I've increased passive income. You just have to take action. It's like it's like instructions. Like you can do it. There's no secret here. Like I said, when you're analyzing the properties, there's the 1% rule. I love that. The other rule I love is the 50% rule. And what that is, how do you tell if a property is performing or not? So what I like to do, um, you know, if a property is performing well, 50% of the income that it produces every month should go in your pocket. The other 50 to bills. That's considered a good producing property. Now, with single family homes, you'll almost never get that. I've got that with my 2 family, just about. My 3 family crushes it. My 4 family is gonna, it's gonna demolish it. So, there's a pattern there, right? So the more units you have, the easier it is to make that 50% rule. And then the other piece of that, when you start scaling, is you can have a unit empty and still hit that 50% rule. Now, if you got a single family and you have a unit empty, are you ever going to meet that 50 rule? It's
No.
impossible.
Yeah.
That's a good rule. I've heard of the 1% rule, but the 50% is new to me.
Yeah. And there's definitely, there's an algorithm there. Like 1% will almost never do it. 2% usually do it. 3% should always do it. And 4% will crush it. 4 units.
Nice.
Sorry.
And Chris, I want to clarify something because we do have a lot of young listeners. Our audience is anywhere between 18 and 25 years old. Use the term hard money. What is hard money lending for people who don't know out there?
So what that is, those are private lenders, and it's at a much higher rate, um, and there's the deadlines and terms are usually a lot more stringent than you would get from a typical lender.
And Kellen, can you explain the difference? Like how's that juxtaposed to like a mortgage you get on a property, Nick?
Yeah, so if you want to buy a house and it's turnkey, or maybe you have to do some fixes, or you're trying to squeeze some money out of the seller to fix some of the small fixes on a house that you're going to be living in, your primary resident, you're going to go to a banker like yourself, John, or go to a broker. Hard money is lender is where you're going to go for a house that you're going to be flipping. That, or maybe flip and then rent, or like fix up and rent. That's where you're gonna go to a hard money lender. And my lender that I use, they do not do any hard money lending. they don't like that. It's a lot more riskier. That's why the interest rates are a lot higher. So you get to find a lender that does that. And that's typically all they do is hard money. If you find a hard money lender, at least here in Houston, that I've experienced.
Thank you for that. And Chris, you notice, like you mentioned, that you transitioned from the condo to the multifamily and the flipping through your neighbor who you rode 4x4s with. For someone who's just starting out, say you're a 25-year-old kid who's a banker and who's trying to buy a second real estate property, what actions would you take to build your network? Because you said you have a pretty good network in Vermont. You always have people reaching out to you and talking to you. How would you be active? Like, what would be the first step for that person to build up their network in real estate?
So what's funny is Brandon Turner talks about this, and it's not to be to brag or what have you, but you always want to be talking about it. You always want to have conversations about it. Brandon Turner talks about one of the best deals he did is he's always telling people he's interested in multifamily. And he's at church one day and he's talking about multifamilies and he meets somebody at church that's selling a multifamily. So it's just, anytime anybody's talked to me in the last 5 years, I'm talking about multifamilies. I'm talking about Teslas, whether I'm sitting at a, card game playing poker, wherever I am, I'm always, these are the things I'm always talking about.
Real estate isn't a hobby. It's not a job. It's a lifestyle. If you're in it, you're always talking about it.
Absolutely.
You always bring up, I always bring up the idea like, oh, you didn't know I'm a realtor actually. Yeah. Oh, I'm also an investor. Like, you always got to bring it up. If you want to do real estate, that's all you're talking about.
Yes. Let everybody know you're interested in it.
Yep.
Hey, Chris, I got one more question for you. What is something that you were surprised by real estate? It could be anything, the cash flow, or maybe it was a deal or something. Just something that you were surprised by that you just didn't anticipate getting into real estate.
That's a great question. It's really one of the things that surprised me about real estate is I talk to a lot of people because I'm always trying to influence people and get them into real estate. And you can really manifest a deal. You know what I mean? You can really manifest it and make it happen. You just got to put your mind to it and figure out a way. If you know it's a good deal, you really just the power of believing and just manifesting. And you can do the forced appreciation. And it's not as hard as you think. It's really not. Like anybody can do it. You don't have to be handy. That's one thing everybody asks me. I am not a handy person. I don't fix anything in my house. I hire somebody to fix everything. Ask my wife. And so what do I do with my rental properties in Vermont? I hire somebody to fix that stuff. It just means I make a little bit, in rental that month. But nothing comes out of my earned income. The properties all pay for themselves. Once they get established and they get going, when I have a partnership with somebody, which I do on a duplex up there, now that it's up, it's running, that's the one where we have the professionals in it. None of our earned income should ever have to go into that property. The property pays for itself, it pays for its repairs, and it pays us.
It's a win-win, is what it seems.
You can force the home run. Doesn't have to be a home run day one. And the other thing, just for your listeners, is every deal's not going to be a home run. Baseball's not won by home runs. Baseball's won with base hits, right? So you're going to have your doubles, you're going to have your triples, and then you can force them into home runs with forced appreciation.
So I'm talking to someone right now who's interested in refinancing, doing a cash out refinance. What do you think what's the best point to refinance your investment property to put that towards your next investment house?
Yeah, so that's a great question. It really depends if on how much you want to scale. If you're scaling aggressively, a lot of people just want, maybe like 80% leverage, 75% leverage, somewhere in that area. For me personally, I like to hold the properties. I like to hold on to them long term. if I'm going to refi and pull that money out, it's basically when the cash flow is not making sense anymore. So at that point, when the cash flow numbers aren't making sense compared to the equity in the property, then you either refi, give yourself some of that equity, or you sell the property. Those are kind of my views on the refi.
What do you mean by doesn't make sense anymore? Like, could you walk that through?
Yeah, absolutely. So there comes a point, especially with single family homes, where that property stops serving you. Again, with the property in Myrtle Beach, it was almost paid off. And with the equity I had tied up in there, it just wasn't serving me anymore. So at that point, I could have done a refi and given myself some of that cash, or just sell it.
Okay. That makes sense.
That
makes sense.
And I think that's a good place to end. Chris, I can honestly say this has probably been one of my favorite podcasts to sit and listen to. I feel like I've learned so much. Do you have anything else you want to add? Anyone you want to shout out? Any other thoughts or opinions you want to say? Because I really appreciate your time. I really feel like I've learned a great deal. Thank you.
Guys, I love talking real estate, and just a couple of things. Just the cliche statements are all true in real estate. Don't wait to buy real estate. Buy real estate and wait.
Yeah,
I love it.
Shout outs, Brandon Turner. Watch his old Brandon Turner, Bigger Pockets. I've learned so much from that guy.
John needs to get that big beard that he has.
Yes.
I'm going to go with the stash look. Well, thank you so much for having on. And for all the listeners, thank you for listening, and God bless.
Guys, thank you so much.